have those family meetings, talk about the resources that you do and do not have, and start to build a real plan that's based not only on financial resources, but also on relational resources.
Are you hoping to stay in your own home as long as possible as you get older, but not sure what it will take to make all that happen? Well, for many Canadians, aging in place isn't just a goal, it's a deeply held priority. In fact, 96% of Canadians aged 65 or older say that they will do whatever they can to avoid going into a long-term care facility. Well, welcome back to the Steadyhand Coffee Break video series. Today, we're tackling a subject that's top of mind for many families, and that's aging in place. What does it really mean? What are the hidden costs? What can you do now to protect your independence, reduce stress, and make sure that your later years are as comfortable, safe, and fulfilling as possible? Now, to help us unpack all of this, I'm joined by Julia Chung, certified financial planner and founder of Spring Planning. Julia has spent years guiding families through the financial and logistical realities of long-term care, healthcare, and making sure that their living arrangements evolve as gracefully as their needs change. Julia, welcome back. Thanks again for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me again.
There's a lot to dig into, but let's start with the big picture. We'll zoom back a little bit. I read a recent Wharton Business School study that noted that over the next 25 years, the global population over 65 is going to double, and those over 80 will almost triple. And that's providing a significant retirement and healthcare planning challenge. From your experience working with Canadian families, what does this mean for Canadian retirees specifically, both in terms of the financial stress this involves and those healthcare gaps?
This is a huge consideration for all families, and it's something that I think a lot of us aren't talking about as much as we should be, because of course we all believe that we are going to be young and mobile and capable forever. So it's really, really hard to wrap our minds around these things. So I think it's really important for people who are advising those families about fun things like retirement to really be bringing into the conversation the part of retirement that might just not be as much fun, so that we can have real conversations about what's possible.
Now, there's a lot to unpack in terms of what's possible. And I know it's a little bit challenging because a lot of this relates to some sort of provincial healthcare issues. But can you try to give us an outline of what our provincial healthcare covers for retirees and what it doesn't?
As you said, healthcare is provincially mandated. So it's really important to understand what your province covers and what it doesn't. Every province has its own website with long, detailed lists of what is covered. But generally speaking, what you'll see is that most provinces have some form of pharmacare that will help you with costs around things like prescriptions or hearing aids or those sorts of things. Most provinces provide some level of nursing care, some types of what they call adult daycare, although I wish they use a different word than that. And then all provinces provide some residential care, what we often call long-term care. The amount that they provide and who qualifies for that really is different from province to province.
And what are the most surprising costs that your clients and the work that you do face that really fall outside of the public coverage?
I think most people, because we can't imagine ourselves being disabled or old or sick, are surprised by most of the costs and just the time involved. Suddenly you're going to see the doctor more often. Suddenly you need different types of care. It's surprising that you can't walk as well as you used to, and you might need new mobility supports. And it's frustrating and upsetting that it's harder to think about these things as well. So all of this comes together to create these costs that are both time intensive, emotionally intensive, and financially intensive that we just hadn't considered. I'm never going to experience a heart condition. I'm never going to have bed sores from laying in the bed a lot more often because I'm not as mobile as I used to be. Like, these things are just so hard. So I'd say almost all the costs are surprising, but things beyond basics of prescriptions and just recognizing that we have to often change our entire environment.
I'm actually going through a bit of a reverse surprise. As many long-term viewers of our channel will know, my father, 97 years old, he lives independently. And our family are beginning to really explore the different things that are going to support his continued independence. And I'm actually, frankly, pleasantly surprised by the number of opportunities we have to bring healthcare professionals, resources, ideas. I mentioned on another video recently that we've moved from individual prescriptions to these blister packs, and that was all in the recommendation of the pharmacist. So there's a lot of real great opportunities out there, and I just don't think enough of us are aware of them. Well, let's talk about aging and decision making. And I think we all know that studies are showing that our health and financial literacy declines, possibly by upwards of 1% per year as we age, which can lead to poor decisions on insurance issues or just, frankly, any kind of care. Do you witness this in the work that you do with families? And if yes, how do you help families stay informed and avoid costly mistakes?
Absolutely. Witnessing this all the time and seeing more and more of it because, of course, we have this enormous population that's aging and living much longer than most people expected. For example, when I do projections for people, most people are like, oh, I'm not going to live into my 90s. We should do a shorter projection than that. And as you know, people absolutely live into their late 90s and more people will. So, just talking about that piece is hard. And I would say in an ideal world, families are having regular meetings, no matter how old people are, and talking about how we support and interact with each other. And it sounds like your family is actually doing a good job around this, but most families are not. And that is one of the biggest issues that I'm seeing is people feeling kind of like, so if you're in the younger generation as you are helping your father out to be able to step forward and say, hey, Dad, I think you might need some help here. That can be really difficult in a dynamic where you're the child and they're the grown up and feeling like this isn't an okay thing to ask. This isn't an okay thing to talk about. And them as parents not feeling safe to ask for help or even realizing that they need the help. So the thing about cognitive decline is you often don't know it's happening. And it's super insulting and upsetting to hear from someone else that you're becoming dumber. It doesn't feel very good. At the same time that maybe your body's not doing what it used to. Like this is an emotionally fraught experience, and it's really hard for families to talk about it. But I think what I like to introduce to families is the idea that we do need to start having regular family meetings before a problem arises. We recognize that we're interconnected humans and that we want to help each other. And sometimes dad wants to help kids, and sometimes kids want to help dad. And if we can admit that's just the starting point and start to have regular family meetings about how we interact with each other before a problem, then we can start to develop the psychological safety to have those conversations and to help each other. Now, for lots of people, it's too late. We've already got some problems. And then unfortunately, we are having to, push our way in to our parents' situation and say, you're not okay, and deal with their anger. So if we can avoid that with family meetings that start pretty young, I would highly recommend it.
Couldn't agree more. And for me, there's two dimensions to successfully having these conversations as a adult child with your aging parents. And one of them is clearly empathy. Really have you have to really think about things from their perspective and what they're going through and to be able to have that conversation effectively, but also sharing. And one of the things that I've encouraged people to think about doing is sharing as an adult child, sharing your will with your older parents to begin a conversation around, their estate planning. Because as you know from your experience, often those estate plans go awry long after you can do anything about it. In other words, the person has died and the family dynamics are just changing, on the fly because of the nature of what's been what the will is contemplated. So, yeah, let's get started. Let's share and let's be extraordinarily empathetic. Let's dive a little deeper into long-term care and private care and the cost of all that stuff. Can you give us a sense of what are the different options for long-term care beyond aging in place?
Most provinces will provide a certain level of residential care. And fun fact, my mom worked in long-term care. So as a child, I spent a lot of time in elder care homes and having many, many extra grandparents, which was super fun for me. Um, but at the time, there wasn't as high of a need for this type of elder care. And I really don't think we've built up enough. So what we'll see is with publicly funded and subsidized long-term care, the waiting lists are very long and qualifications are, from a income perspective are significant. And so a lot of people are looking at privately owned homes, which often also have waiting lists. And what you get in those homes really differ from location to location. So some of the families I'm working with are doing tours of various different homes and trying to understand not only what the costs are, but what you get out of it. And I will say, like, what a lot of people don't realize is there's a difference between kind of regular residential care and then what we might call 24-hour or memory care. And the costs for those are also really, really significantly different. So, as an example, in the province of BC, kind of the median cost for residential care currently is around $8,000 a month. And when we get into, say, memory care, we're talking 15, 16, maybe even $20,000 a month, depending on the needs involved and the luxuriousness of the environment. So, it's quite different. It's worth doing the research, and for a lot of provincially funded care, you actually still have to do that anyways, and provide, say, like your top three choices, and hope you get your first one.
Pardon my naivety, but at the first level of provincially provided care, long-term care, is that paid for by the province?
Mostly. So there's it's basically they look at your income levels and there's a minimum charge in most cases and up to say 80% of your net income with a maximum on top of that. That's usually kind of how it's structured.
And then private care, you mentioned earlier, it's $8,000 a month, going up to possibly 20,000, depending upon the needs. Um, so let's go back to aging in place, staying at home, because obviously that is a preference for the vast majority of us. What are the costs associated with that?
There's so much more complicated. So when you have people coming in to care for you in your home, you are hiring different people. So you have somebody who does the housekeeping, somebody who does the companionship, someone who does different levels of nursing. So, there's an LPN, there's an RN. Which one do you need? All of these people charge an hourly rate. And those hourly rates are, of course, different. So, one of the things that people don't realize is when we're aging in place, we need somebody to manage the system. And if the individual who is aging in place is losing cognition, which apparently we all are once we hit about 55, it's all starting to go down, then it's usually the family that is managing this entire system. And it can get much more expensive. People think it's going to be cheaper because they're, I don't know, thinking they're just going to hire one person and they're going to be there 24 hours a day and maybe that'll cost some sort of average wage. That is not how it works. And I've definitely seen, minimal care costs at maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a month for somebody who just needs like housekeeping and companionship, then easily up to the $20,000 a month for somebody who needs a lot of support. So it's not cheaper to age in place, and it's a lot more complicated.
And does the province provide much aging in place support?
Some. So again, depending on your province, and also depending on the acuteness of your need. So certainly with some of my clients, again in BC, where I am, where people are terminal, um, uh, there's a lot of free provincially provided home nursing. But if you're not terminal, then that's usually not free, but there are income tested adult daycare programs and that sort of thing, but you do need somebody to get you there.
And there may also be some municipality provisions as well. It seems to me that part of the people that we've begun to engage for my father are actually coming from the city of Toronto.
Yeah, so it depends on your city as well and what they're putting their money in. I live in a community that's well known as a retirement community, so there's lots of supports for elder folks, whether it's provincially or municipally provided. But if you live in an area that isn't kind of got that focus, you're probably going to have less.
Well, I know, and my father lives in a cooperative, which is a version of a condominium.
That's
And
wonderful.
yeah, there's a really strong sense of community. And I know I actually was in his building the other day. I met one of the other residents. I asked the resident, "Do you participate in the men's night events?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely." I said, "Well, you might know my father, Bill Toyne." And he said, "Oh, of course, he's the bartender."
See, this is really important, and this is one of the things that we don't talk about a lot when it comes to elder care is that isolation is a frequent component of retirement at almost any age. And when we're talking about maintaining cognition, I often talk to my clients who are pre-retirement, who are very worried about, having the right amounts of money, which is an important concern. The next thing that I'm talking to them about is, what are you doing in your life to remove isolation, to have socialization? Because as soon as you stop engaging with other people, if you're not involved in a community, your health goes down. It is severely impacted. So having a community like your father is in is wonderful. That's the dream, and probably why he's doing so well at 97.
Well, and he also volunteers twice a week at the Odette Cancer Center at Sunnybrook Hospital. So twice a week, he gets up extra early, heads up there for 8:30 till 12 o'clock volunteering assignment. And he wouldn't miss one of those days, if he could avoid it. He just loves it.
And that's so important. And I've talked to some clients who have said to me, yeah, I mean, I get it and it sounds great, but I'm not, an extroverted person. I don't enjoy those sorts of things as much. And I've said, there are like cat shelters that would love for you to come and hang out with them and just nap with them and stuff. Any community is a good community, and healthcare actually has a lot to do with community engagement.
Yeah, that's a great point. We took a number of our clients to the Toronto Humane Society for a morning session, and they were like desperate for people to come in and help, walk the cats and the dogs and stuff like that. There's tons of things that you can do. But this caregiving environment, for adult children, it can impose a heavy emotional time commitment. There are sort of proximity issues. There's financial burdens. Sometimes it falls on one particular child because of the proximity to the parent, or all those sorts of things. So how are you having these conversations with your clients, and are there sort of things that you would advise families to be thinking about well before any of these sort of support mechanisms are put in place?
Yes, absolutely. So again, if we can start with family meetings where everybody kind of talks about what they're willing and able to give, right? Like what kind of resources do we have to support each other? And if you're the eldest child, you're often the person in that position who's doing most of the care for the parent. There's usually an expectation in that family. You might have feelings about that. We need to get that all out on the table, hopefully with facilitated support, maybe from a family therapist, before we're getting into that place with our parents. If we haven't been able to do it beforehand, let's do it now. But there's a lot of things we want to think about. Does this feel like a burden? Or if it doesn't feel like a burden, and yes, I'm absolutely doing it, do I have an expectation that I'm going to be getting something more out of the estate because of that? Because that happens a lot. So we need to try and get these conversations out on the table. We need to recognize that a lot of the people that are adult children providing support and care to their elder parents also have younger children. And that sandwich generation situation happens in almost every generation now. So, what resources and supports do we actually have? Do we want to consider multi generational living, or would that make it worse? Like, your family is your family, and there is not one right way to do this. It would be delightful if everybody got along well enough that we could all live in a multi generational home and it would be really harmonious. That's common in a lot of families around the world to live multi-generationally, and that helps every generation. But it can also be terrible if that's not how your family works. So what I would say is there's no one right way to do it. We need to be talking about it. We need to get our expectations out on the table and talk about them, because expectations within families lead to enormous resentments and run down reduced care for the people we love and real big breakdown in the estates. And get help. Like, you don't have to know how to do this by yourself. Get some help. Have those family meetings. Talk about the resources that you do and do not have, and start to build a real plan that's based not only on financial resources, but also on relational resources, and try to remove senses of, well, I have to, or anything like that from the conversation, and be as realistic as we can. It's so hard.
Well, I know exactly what you mean, Julia, because certainly watching my wife support her parents, and now being involved with my brother and my sister-in-law, my wife supporting my dad, there's a lot of dynamics that can happen here. Are there other things that you would sort of suggest that families think about in supporting the caregivers?
It's so important to support the caregivers, and it's something that I always recommend for every person in a caregiver position of any level, right? If you're just power of attorney for your parents and acting in that role, but they're otherwise kind of okay, you still need support. And I always recommend to my caregivers that you find what kind of support works for you. So there's caregiver groups where you can get together with other caregivers in a facilitated program and talk about the things that you're dealing with. You can feel less alone. You can pick up tips from other people. It's super helpful. Getting mental health support for you to deal with. It's really hard to watch the people who raised you, who were, the most important people in the world when you were little, to watch them decline. This is emotionally intense. And for some of the people that I work with, they say, oh, I'm fine. I'm being the stoic, strong person. We'll deal with me later. We need to deal with you now, because if you fall apart throughout this process, and many caregivers do, your parents, your grandparents, whoever you're caring for, your spouse, they're not going to be okay. We need to take care of you, and we need to take care of you now.
Before we wrap up, let's just talk a little bit about financing mechanisms. So, whether you're aging in place, that's going to cost you some money potentially. Whether you're going into a facility, it could cost you some money. How do you plan for that from a financial perspective? Like, how valuable would it be for people to take out long-term care insurance policies, if that's even possible, critical illness insurance, reverse mortgages? Can you just kind of give a thumbnail on how you help people think about and plan for that financially?
When I'm thinking about this, what I definitely do in retirement plans is always test for the possibility that we're going to need some more care as we get older, and look for, do we have enough in, say, our investment portfolio that could potentially fund that care as we get older, and how are we thinking about spending from that? Alternatively, could we use the equity in our home? What are the reverse mortgage options? Reverse mortgages in Canada are a lot better than the terrible things that we've heard about what's happened in the States. They're a lot safer for people. There's options in British Columbia, and I think none of it, to defer your property taxes on your home, which can be really helpful from a cash flow perspective. And then, there might be some insurance options. What I will say is long-term care insurance is not super available. Most of the insurance companies have looked at the costs and said, this is getting wild. We don't feel comfortable insuring it. there are limitations, right? Where you can get long-term care insurance, fantastic. Hang on to that if you've got it. But there's limitations to how much you can get out of that long-term care, right? It might be like $1,000 a week or something like that, which seems like a good idea 10 years ago, but now it's not enough. So we still have to make up for that. Critical illness policies can be helpful, but only if it's got kind of the clauses around activities of daily living. Otherwise, you won't get the payout. And then there are some life insurance structures when you're looking at permanent life insurance that you could access the cash value in the insurance policy on a tax-free basis if you kind of qualify under the activities of daily living. So we look at all of those various options. I would say there's not one kind of magic bullet that's going to solve it all.
Well, we've started high, we've gone deep. I don't know whether this is going back high or getting deeper, but if you had to boil everything we've talked about today down to just one takeaway when it comes to planning for the rising cost of healthcare in later life, whether aging in place or going to a facility, what would that one takeaway be for people listening today?
Start having family meetings. And I mean, as soon as anybody becomes an adult, and how I've started this in some of the younger families is your child just turned 19. You are automatically not the person who could take over their accounts if they're in an accident. Let's get them a power of attorney. Let's start having conversations with them. And let's focus on the younger folks, but bring our parents into that conversation. Make everybody feel comfortable.
Well, we're working on a legacy binder at Steadyhand. A number of our clients have asked us to help them think that through. And certainly within the legacy binder would be this, there's just generally an encouragement to share this with your family. And Julie, as you think about starting that conversation, do you use any particular tools to help clients, begin to have that conversation within their families?
Yeah, I've got a little handbook that just has a list of sort of the questions to get started that can help people kind of start the conversation with their family.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's such an important conversation that we need to have with our families. And frankly, as you've identified, too many families wait too long to have that conversation. And if you've been watching this and you're wondering how rising healthcare costs and aging possibly, hopefully in place fit into your own retirement picture, we put together a free resource to help. It's called 3 Steps to Retirement. It's a simple, actionable guide to building a solid foundation for the years ahead. We'll provide a link to that in our show notes below for you to be able to download that. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Steady Hand Coffee Break.